The Saturday morning sun streamed into our apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny golden fairies. It was the kind of perfect light that made our small, but meticulously decorated, home feel like a page from a magazine. Alex was at the kitchen island, a broad smile on his face as he swiped through photos of the house on his tablet. The house. Our future. A four-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for a dog, and someday a swing set. It was everything we'd ever talked about. The physical manifestation of 5 years of hard work, saving every penny, and dreaming together. He slid the tablet across the smooth quartz countertop towards me. Look at that sunroom, Sabrina. Can't you just picture your easel set up in there? You'd have perfect light all day. I leaned against him, breathing in the familiar scent of his coffee and the clean, crisp smell of his shirt. Ah, it's perfect, I whispered, my heart swelling with a kind of blissful ache. Almost too perfect. Are you sure we can do this? He wrapped an arm around my waist, his touch firm and reassuring. We've done everything right. My promotion last year, your freelance business finally taking off. Our credit is flawless. The down payment is sitting in the bank. All we have to do is sign on the dotted line. He kissed the top of my head. The appointment is at 10. Ms. Wallace at the bank said it should be a formality. She just needs to verify our final statements and run the numbers one last time. For years, our life had been a carefully constructed blueprint. We met in our mid-20s, fell in love with a gentle, uncomplicated ease, and got married. We set financial goals and met them. We built a life that was stable, predictable, and deeply happy. Alex, with his steady job in tech finance and his calm, logical demeanor, was the architect of our security. I, the artist, brought the color and warmth. We were a perfect team. He was my rock, the one person in the world I trusted without reservation. Every major decision, every dollar spent, we discussed. There were no secrets in our house. That transparency was the foundation on which everything else was built. Okay, I said, pulling away with a smile. Let me just get changed. Don't want to apply for $1 million mortgage in my pajamas. He laughed, a deep, easy sound that always made me feel safe. Wear the blue dress, he said. The one you wore on our 3rd anniversary. It's my lucky charm. I went into our bedroom, the sunlight following me, and pulled the silk dress from the closet. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I saw a woman on the brink of getting everything she'd ever wanted, standing beside the man who had helped her dream it up. I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful, it almost brought tears to my eyes. I had no idea that in less than an hour, the man I saw as my foundation would reveal himself to be made of sand, and the life we had so carefully built was about to be washed away by a single devastating wave. I took one last look at our reflection, a happy, hopeful couple, and thought, this is it. The first day of the rest of our lives? The irony of that thought would haunt me for years to come. The bank office was exactly as you'd imagine. Sterile, quiet, and smelling faintly of industrial-grade cleaner and old paper. The air conditioning was a little too high, and I subtly rubbed my arms as we sat in plush but firm chairs opposite a large mahogany desk. Mrs. Wallace, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and an impeccably tailored suit, offered us a polite, professional smile. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, thank you for coming in. As I said on the phone, this should be fairly straightforward. Your application is very strong. She clicked and typed, her manicured fingers flying across the keyboard. On the large monitor, angled slightly away from us, I could see spreadsheets and columns of numbers, the anatomy of our financial life laid bare. Alex sat beside me, the picture of calm confidence. He'd loosened his tie slightly, and he rested one hand on my knee, a small grounding gesture that said, "We've got this." I squeezed his hand back, my earlier nervousness melting away under his steady presence. Everything looks excellent, Ms. Wallace murmured, peering at the screen through her half-moon glasses. Assets, income-to-debt ratio, credit history. It's all exemplary. She paused, her cursor hovering over a line item. She leaned a little closer to the screen, her brow furrowing for the first time. The silence in the room stretched, suddenly thick and heavy. I felt a tiny, prickling sense of unease. "Just one moment," she said, her tone no longer warm, but purely clinical. "I'm just reviewing your personal savings account statement from the last quarter, Mr. Harrison. There's a significant outflow I need to document for the underwriters." I looked at Alex. He still had a faint smile on his face, but it seemed frozen in place. His hand on my knee felt suddenly stiff, the warmth gone. "Of course," he said, his voice a little tight. "Just business expenses, I'm sure." Ms. Wallace didn't look up. She clicked the mouse, and I heard the soft whir of the printer behind her. She retrieved the paper and laid it on the desk between us, turning it around for us to see. She had circled a single transaction in red ink. The date was from 2 months ago. The description was cryptic, and the amount was staggering. My eyes scanned the line, and my brain struggled to process it. My own largest expense that month had been a few $100s on art supplies. This was astronomical. It was more than our entire down payment. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. Then, Ms. Wallace looked directly at my husband, her gaze sharp and unflinching, and she dropped the bomb that shattered our world. "Sir," she asked, her voice devoid of any emotion, "can you explain this $500,000 payment to Project Nightingale?" I turned my head to look at Alex. It was like watching a statue crumble in fast motion. Every ounce of color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, sickly pale mask. His jaw went slack, and his eyes, wide with a terror I had never seen before, darted from the paper to Miss Wallace, and then, finally, to me. In that single horrific moment, his face was a confession. The confident man I married was gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified stranger, and all the air in that cold, quiet office suddenly felt like it had been sucked into a vacuum. The car ride home was a masterclass in suffocating silence. The engine of our sensible sedan, usually a comforting hum, sounded like a roar in the dead air between us. Alex drove, his hands clutching the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were bone white. He stared straight ahead, his jaw locked, a muscle twitching frantically in his cheek. I sat in the passenger seat, my body rigid, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. The silk of my lucky blue dress felt like a costume from another life. The dream of the house, the sunroom, the swing set. It had all evaporated in the sterile chill of that bank office, leaving behind the acrid smoke of betrayal. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The loan officer's neutral question, the circled line item on the bank statement, and Alex's face. That horrifying, ghostly pale face. It wasn't just the face of a man caught in a lie. It was the face of a man whose entire world had just imploded. Twice I opened my mouth to speak, to scream, to demand an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. What could I even ask? Who is Project Nightingale? Where did you get $500,000? And where did it go? The questions felt too big, too monstrous for the confined space of the car. The man next to me, the man I had shared a bed with for 6 years, was a complete stranger. We pulled into our designated spot in the parking garage of our apartment building. Alex switched off the ignition, and the ensuing silence was even more profound, more damning. He didn't move to get out. He just sat there, staring through the windshield. "Alex," I finally managed to say. My voice was a dry, rasping whisper. "You have to say something." He flinched, as if my voice had physically struck him. He let out a long, shuddering breath, and finally turned to look at me. The terror in his eyes had been replaced by a desperate, pleading look. "Sabrina, I can explain." "Then explain!" The words ripped out of me, louder and harsher than I intended. "What was that? What is Project Nightingale? Was that our money? The money for the house?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. No, not the down payment. It was from my stocks. The ones from my signing bonus before we even met. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Alex, a loan officer just uncovered a secret $500,000 payment you made, and you looked like you were about to have a heart attack. We're well past complicated. We're in some other territory entirely, and you need to tell me where the hell we are. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. Please, Sabrina, not now. It's a business deal, a private investment. I signed an NDA. I can't talk about it. It's all perfectly legal, just confidential. The lie was so blatant, so insulting, it felt like a slap. An NDA? A private investment? The man in the bank hadn't looked like a savvy investor protecting a deal. He had looked like a criminal whose cover was blown. The foundation of trust I thought we'd built had been a lie, and I was standing in the rubble, realizing I had no idea how deep the deception went. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car without another word. The dream was dead. Now I had to find out if my marriage was too. The moment I stepped back into our apartment, the beautiful sunlit space felt tainted. The magazine Perfect Home now seemed like a movie set, a carefully constructed facade for a drama I never knew I was a part of. I walked over to the quartz island and slammed my purse down. The sound echoed in the tense silence. Alex followed me in, closing the door softly behind him, as if a loud noise might cause the whole charade to shatter. He stood by the door, looking lost and small in the space that was supposed to be our shared sanctuary. Sabrina, please, he started, his voice strained. Let's just calm down and talk about this. I am calm, I said, my voice dangerously low. I turned to face him, crossing my arms over my chest. I am waiting for you to talk. Not to lie to me, Alex. Not anymore. I want the truth, the real truth. What is Project Nightingale? He walked towards me slowly, his hands held up in a placating gesture. I told you, it's an investment, a tech startup. They're in stealth mode. It's highly confidential. The name is just a project code. Every word out of his mouth felt like a carefully crafted piece of fiction. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He kept glancing around the room, at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. His body language was screaming what his words were trying to conceal. He was lying. A tech startup? I pressed, taking a step toward him. What do they do? It's in the biotech space, artificial intelligence-driven medical research. It's revolutionary stuff. And it required you to secretly wire $500,000 from a personal account without ever mentioning a single word to your wife? The wife you are supposedly building a life with? The wife who was sitting right next to you, about to co-sign on a 30-year mortgage? Make it make sense, Alex! My voice rose with every word, fueled by a terrifying cocktail of hurt and fury. I was going to tell you, he insisted, his own voice cracking. Once the deal was finalized, once it was public, I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to walk in one day and tell you we were set for life, that you'd never have to worry about another thing. The excuse was so grandiose, so insulting to my intelligence, that it broke something inside me. The desperation to believe him, the tiny flicker of hope that this was all a misunderstanding, was extinguished. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of his betrayal. Stop it, I said, my voice flat and empty of emotion. Just stop lying. My voice flat. The man I saw in that office wasn't a shrewd investor. He was a man who was terrified of being caught. So I'm going to ask you one more time. What is Project Nightingale? He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The truth was lodged in his throat, a secret so big he couldn't bring himself to speak it. The silence was his answer. Fine, I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a profound, hollow sadness. I can't do this, Alex. I can't live in a house of lies. I walked past him toward our bedroom. I'm going to pack a bag. You have until I'm done to decide if you're going to tell me the truth. Not your version of the truth. The actual, ugly, unvarnished truth. Because if you don't, I'm leaving, and I won't be coming back. The ultimatum hung in the air between us, heavy and irrevocable. The home we built together had just become a cage, and I was rattling the bars, desperate for a way out. Alex didn't follow me into the bedroom. Instead, I heard the front door click shut. He was gone. To clear his head, I imagined him saying to himself. The cowardice of it sent a fresh wave of ice-cold anger through me. He would rather run than face me with the truth. For a moment, I stood in the middle of our bedroom, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the unknown. My life, as I knew it, had ended. But then something else kicked in. A survival instinct. A refusal to be the passive, weeping victim in this story he was writing. He thought he could wait me out, come back with a more polished lie when I was exhausted from crying. He was wrong. My grief was quickly crystallizing into a cold, sharp resolve. I wasn't just going to pack a bag. I was going to find out what he was hiding. I turned to his side of the bed. His laptop was on the nightstand, closed. We had no secrets, so I knew his password. The phrase, "a line from the movie we saw on our first date," felt like a cruel joke now. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. The screen flickered to life, showing the familiar background image of us smiling on a beach in Hawaii. The hypocrisy was nauseating. I opened his web browser. The search history was clean, which was in itself a red flag. He was covering his tracks, but he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. I went straight for his email. I started with a simple search. Project Nightingale. My heart hammered against my ribs as the search bar processed the request. 0 results. He was using a separate account. Of course he was. I took a deep breath, trying to think like him. Where would he hide it? I started going through his documents, his cloud storage, anything I could access. Tucked away in a folder labeled Old Tax Docs was a subfolder cryptically named Personal Ventures. Inside were a dozen password-protected, encrypted files. My stomach dropped. This was more sophisticated than a simple affair or a bad investment. This was a deliberate, carefully concealed operation. But among the encrypted files was a single, unprotected PDF. It looked like a contract draft. I clicked it open. Most of it was dense legalese, but my eyes scanned the pages, searching for anything I could understand. I found names and addresses I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. A wire transfer confirmation that mirrored the one from the bank. The recipient account wasn't under the name Project Nightingale. That was just the reference code. The account was a trust, registered to a name that meant nothing to me. The Amy C. Clark Trust. But it was the routing information that made my blood run cold. The receiving bank wasn't a standard commercial institution. It was a small private credit union in Glenmont, a town I'd only ever heard Alex mention once, in a story from his college days. A town he claimed he hadn't been back to in over 15 years. I quickly opened a new browser tab and searched the name. Amy Clark, followed by Glenmont. The first result was a news article from a local paper dated 12 years ago. The headline was stark. Local teen critically injured in suspected DUI crash. Driver flees scene. My hands started to shake violently. I clicked the link. The article detailed a late-night car accident on a rural road. A young woman, Amy Clark, a high school cheerleader, was left with life-altering injuries after another car ran her off the road. The driver was never identified. I scrolled down, my breath caught in my chest, and then I saw the photo. A picture of the mangled car, wrapped around a tree. And in the background, out of focus but still recognizable, was another car. A dark green convertible. The same make and model as the one Alex's parents had given him for his 21st birthday. The one he'd told me he sold because he got tired of it. The laptop screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. This wasn't an investment. It wasn't a secret business. It was blood money. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, the ghost of a 12-year-old crime burning my retinas. The bright, sunny apartment had grown dim as the afternoon wore on. I didn't move. I just reread the article, the contract, connecting the horrifying dots. Each piece of information was a new shovelful of dirt on the grave of the man I thought I had married. The sound of a key in the lock jolted me back to the present. Alex was back. I didn't close the laptop. I didn't wipe my tears. I let him find me there, sitting in the ruins of our life, with the evidence of his unforgivable secret glowing on the screen. He walked into the bedroom, his face etched with exhaustion. He saw me, then his eyes flickered to the laptop. The finality of his exposure washed over his features, and he sagged against the doorframe as if his bones could no longer support his weight. The fight was gone. The lies were gone. All that was left was a man who had been running for 12 years and had finally hit a wall. "Sabrina!" he whispered, his voice hoarse. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, my expression a cold mask of judgment. He slowly walked over and stood behind me, looking down at the news article on the screen. He let out a long, ragged sigh that sounded like it was torn from the deepest part of his soul. "Her name was Amy," he said, his voice barely audible. It was after a party, my senior year of college. Everyone was drinking. I was drinking." He paused, and the confession tumbled out, a torrent of buried guilt and shame. He told me everything. He'd been drunk, stupid, and showing off in his new convertible. He'd clipped her car on a dark road, sending her spinning into a tree. He panicked. He was the son of a prominent family, with a bright future and a law school acceptance letter waiting for him. So he drove away. He just left her there. My father took care of it. He continued, his voice hollow. He had connections. He made sure my name was never mentioned, that my car was never identified. He had it stolen, and we reported it the next day. They paid her family a fortune to sign a non-disclosure agreement to make it all go away. They bought her a lifetime of care, and they bought my silence. They bought my future. I felt sick. The perfect, respectable family I had married into was built on a foundation of corruption and lies. "She was paralyzed, Sabrina," he choked out, the words thick with unshed tears. "From the waist down. I ruined her life, and I just walked away." I finished college, went to law school, though I could never bring myself to practice, and tried to forget. I met you, and for a few years, I almost did. "So what is this?" I asked, my voice like ice as I gestured to the contract. Project Nightingale. What is this, $500,000? "It's her brother," he said, finally sinking onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "He found me a few months ago. He said the money from my parents was running out, that Amy's medical needs were more complex now. He said he didn't want to go to the police. He just wanted to make sure she was taken care of. He said it was my turn to pay. He called it Project Nightingale. A sick joke, I guess. He said this was my chance to be her guardian angel." "It's blackmail, Alex," I said flatly. "This isn't about her care, it's blackmail." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. I know, but what was I supposed to do? If I don't pay, he'll expose me. Everything, my job, my reputation, our life. It would all be over. I would go to prison. I was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect us. The excuse, the same one he'd tried to use before, now landed with the full, devastating weight of the truth behind it. He hadn't been protecting me. He had been preserving a lie. And in doing so, he had chained us both to the ghost of Amy Clark. For a long time, the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the laptop and Alex's ragged breathing. He sat on the edge of our bed, a broken man, stripped of all his secrets, and I stood, feeling like a stranger in my own home, my own life. The anger I had felt earlier was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but it was now complicated by a confusing swirl of other emotions: pity, disgust, and a profound, world-altering sense of betrayal. He hadn't cheated on me. In some ways, this felt infinitely worse. An affair would have been a betrayal of our marriage. This was a betrayal of reality itself. The man I loved didn't exist. He was a character Alex had been playing for years, a role he'd perfected. The real Alex was a man who had left a girl to die on the side of a road and then let his father buy his freedom. How do you come back from that? How do you look at the person sleeping next to you and not see the crime he buried? "You lied to me," I said, the words falling like stones into the silence. "Every single day, for 6 years, every time you told me you loved me, every time we made plans for our future, it was all built on this. On this Rotten foundation. I know, he whispered, not looking at me. I wanted to tell you so many times. But how could I? How could I tell the best person I've ever known that I was this? I was afraid you'd leave me, and I couldn't bear that, so I kept digging the hole deeper. His confession, his pathetic fear, didn't soften me. It enraged me further. So you chose for me, I shot back. You didn't give me the choice to leave or to stay. You made me an unknowing accomplice to your lie. You tied my life, my name, my future to this disgusting secret without my consent. That isn't love, Alex. That is the most selfish thing I have ever heard. I started to pace the room, my mind racing. The house, the mortgage, our 5-year plan. It all felt like a childish fantasy now. We weren't a normal couple with normal problems. We were a woman who had been deceived and a man being blackmailed for a hit and run. Our biggest problem wasn't a loan application, it was a felony. And then, a new, chilling thought cut through my anger. The brother. The blackmailer. The $500,000 wasn't a one-time payment. I knew that with a gut-deep certainty. This was just the beginning. He would bleed Alex dry, and by extension, he would bleed us dry. He would hold this over our heads forever. We would never be free. We would always be tethered to his demands, living in fear of the day he decided to expose Alex anyway. I stopped pacing and looked at Alex, really looked at him. I saw the weakness, the fear that had led him to make one terrible decision after another. First, fleeing the scene of the accident. Then, letting his father cover it up. And now, submitting to blackmail instead of facing the consequences. I realized in that moment that my life had come to a crossroads. I had two options. I could walk away, pack my bag like I'd threatened, and leave him to be devoured by the monster of his own making. Or I could stay. Not out of forgiveness. It was too soon for that. Maybe it would always be too soon. But out of a grim sense of self-preservation. My life was entangled with his now, whether I liked it or not. The blackmailer wasn't just a threat to Alex. He was a threat to me. A decision began to form in my mind. Cold and hard and clear. Alex had made his choice 12 years ago, and another one a few months ago. Now it was my turn to choose. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room, leaving Alex to wallow in his despair. I needed space to think, to let the cold clarity of my decision settle. The last rays of sunlight were fading, casting long, dark shadows across the room that mirrored the darkness that had fallen over our lives. The dream of the house on the hill was a ghost. That life was over, but my life wasn't. When Alex finally emerged from the bedroom, he looked like a man walking to his own execution. His face was pale and puffy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He stopped in the middle of the living room, waiting for my verdict. He was expecting me to leave. I could see it in his eyes. He thought it was over. "I'm not packing my bag," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the hysterical anger or weeping grief from before. It was the voice of someone taking control. A flicker of hope, of disbelief, crossed his face. "Sabrina!" "Don't." I cut him off, holding up a hand. "Don't mistake this for forgiveness. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for the lies, for what you did, for who you were. Maybe I can. Maybe I can't. That's a problem for another day." I walked over to the kitchen island, where his tablet still lay, displaying the picture of our dream house. I picked it up and turned it off, the screen going black. It was a symbolic gesture, the end of a fantasy. "That life is over, Alex," I said, placing the dark tablet on the counter. "The house, the picket fence, the future we planned. It's gone. It was never real to begin with. It was built on a crime." He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "So here's what's going to happen now," I continued, my tone all business. "The artist was gone, replaced by a crisis manager. We are not buying that house. We are not paying him another dime. And we are not going to spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulder, waiting for this man to ruin us. You've been running from this for 12 years. The running stops tonight." He looked up, confused. "What are you talking about? If I stop paying him, he'll go to the police. I'll lose everything." You might, I acknowledged, the words sharp and brutal. That is the consequence of your actions, a consequence your father's money let you avoid for 12 years. But being blackmailed is not a solution. It's a life sentence in a prison of fear. I will not live there with you. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow morning, you are going to call a criminal defense attorney, a real one, not one of your father's fixers, and then we are going to the police. The color drained from his face again. Number Sabrina, no, I can't. You can, I said, my voice unyielding. You will. You will tell them everything about the accident, about your father's cover-up, and about the blackmail. You are going to get ahead of this. You are going to turn your blackmailer into an extortionist. He is committing a crime right now, and that is our only leverage. It was a terrifying gamble. Exposing the blackmail meant exposing the original sin. He could still go to prison. Our lives would be blown apart, subjected to public scrutiny and judgment. But it was a chance at a real future, not a life spent paying for a secret. For the first time, he stood up straight, a flicker of something other than fear in his eyes. Maybe it was the shock of my proposal, or maybe, just maybe, it was a spark of the man I thought he was. He had been drowning in his guilt, and I had just thrown him a line. It wasn't a life raft to safety, but a path through the storm. We face this, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Together. Not because I've forgiven you, but because this thing, this secret, has its hands around both of our throats now, and I refuse to let it strangle me. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't the suffocating silence of secrets, but the heavy, charged silence before a battle. We were no longer a happy couple dreaming of a home. We were two broken people, standing in the rubble of a life, about to declare war.